Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Market Values, the Transfermarkt podcast that lets you know what's going on in football each and every week and how that relates to the market values of every single player in the top leagues across Europe and the rest of the world. And I'm once again joined by my colleague Manu Veth. Manu, how's it going? We're now in international break, calm waters, if you will. Everyone's taking a deep breath at Transfermarkt, but there's still plenty to talk about, isn't there?
There's always something to talk about when it comes to football, and it's been a really busy period at Transfermarkt, hasn't it, with all the different market value updates that we had. Glad that's almost done.
Yeah, I mean, literally just before we started recording here, Antoine Griezmann gets confirmed as moving to Orlando City, as if, we couldn't even have a week off from transfers. Plenty of stories happening, but...
I am supposed to have a week off, Stefan, but...
You are supposed to have a week off, but Antoine had different thoughts about that one. We've got so much to talk about on today's show. We kick things off in Germany, then we head to Portugal, and then we finish up in Italy, speaking to a number of our wonderful colleagues at Transfermarkt. And we kick things off, as I said, with the German market value update. And Manu, this is a really interesting one. Two big names in the Bundesliga, Jamal Musiala and Michael Olise, swapping places, but also a lot more that we sat down and spoke to Toby about, wasn't there?
Yeah, super interesting, really in depth. Tobias Kroeger really knows his stuff when it comes to market values, and Bundesliga is, of course, his bread and butter. And I thought it was really, really great to talk to him about and sort of going behind the scenes on why Olise went up, Musiala went down, and then we got to talk about a bunch of other players as well, talents, big outstanding talents. But yeah, the whole up and down between Olise and Musiala and the rivalry between friends is a really interesting story.
Yeah, and one player in particular in Hamburg who's doing particularly well this season, that if you are a disgruntled or depressed Tottenham fan, you might want to tune in for that section, because it might cheer you up a little bit to know that a very exciting player.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not, yeah, depends if they have to sell them in the summer or not. But yeah, very interesting nonetheless. Then after that, you spoke to Goncalo, our colleague in Portugal, about all things to do with the Liga Portugal market value update. And a kind of similar story to Germany, where two of the biggest names in the league were the kind of top stories, weren't they? Well,
what was really interesting about that one was a lot of red, a lot of downgrades. Hjulmand and Samu were the two big stories. And we discussed on why there was so much red in Liga Portugal and why it impacted two of the big names. Two very different reasons. Doesn't mean that either one of them are bad players, but Goncalo did a really good job underlining it. And just to tease it a little bit, he said to me that when the market value update was done, they were actually surprised how much red there was at the very top. So it was not planned. It was not like a big plan. Like, this is just like... And then he just kind of looked at it in the analysis afterwards and realized, like, I guess that's how just things are at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like we should have maybe titled the headline for the market value update article "A Bloodbath in Portugal," because that's kind of how it came across. But yeah, a lot to discuss there. Two big names there who could be on the way to other leagues this summer or the following year. And of course, a very exciting winger who joined Porto in January, which you and Goncalo break down. I don't want to spoil it, it's definitely worth listening to, but a very exciting young winger from Poland who... We've actually had our eye on when he was in Poland. I remember we spoke to our data scout in Poland about him prior to moving to Porto, and he's a very exciting young talent who got a big market value upgrade. So definitely worth listening to that section as well. And then we finish up on Serie A. We speak to Marius, our Serie A expert, who's a fantastic host of the Serie A More German Serie A podcast. And he was wonderful. We sat down and spoke to him about Bastoni at Inter Milan, Pio Esposito, who's a very exciting striker on his way up from Inter after really kind of earning his wings in Serie A B. And of course, Manu, two big US men's national team players as well, who were front and centre of the update as well.
Can I just say I'm really excited for Esposito too. I got to interview him at the Club World Cup, and yeah, he's really fulfilled expectations. And of course, Pulisic and McKennie. Good, bad and good news for them. Pulisic going down a little bit. McKennie really improving his stock in Italy, which I think is such a fascinating story, considering that we really thought this would be it for him at Juventus. And phenomenal year. Marius really breaks it down for us why he thinks the market value upgrade was deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like those two players have been kind of entwined their entire careers. Like one goes up, one goes down. So yeah, very interesting. And of course, we then wrapped up with Marius breaking down why obviously Como are on their way towards possible Champions League qualification, and some of the wonderful players in Cesc Fabregas' team, and what is probably one of the most exciting, club projects, Manu, in European football right now, I would say. Really fascinating. They do such a good job of both developing a brand and developing players, which is, they're doing everything right off the field and on the field, which is like, I feel like it's like an evolution from what they're doing at Venezia FC, right? Which is like become more a brand rather than a football club. And at Como, they're both a brand, but also a very successful football club. And I think that's a really fascinating thing. And Marius did a fantastic job breaking it all down. Yeah, he absolutely did. Before we get to all that, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's subscribed, everyone who's listened to the show so far. We had lots of comments on YouTube, Spotify, social media, particularly Instagram's been awash with comments and likes, so we really appreciate that. And just a little reminder that going forward, we're going to be trying to use our market value analysis form as something of a hub for this podcast. So if you'd like to kind of make your comments felt about your favourite players, where you think their market value should go up or should go down, head over to Transfermarkt, click on forum in the sub-headline, and then go to market value analysis. And once you're there, you'll get a full breakdown of every player in your domain. And you can obviously just, go into find your player, leave, a comment about whether you think the market value should go up or down. Of course, vote on whether the market value should go up or down. And we'll try to feature as many of those on future shows. And we'll maybe try and do that at the start of the show to kind of get things going and kind of drum up some conversations and opinions and potentially even arguments, which are always interesting. So let us know how you feel about that. Leave comments there, and we'll definitely keep an eye on those going forward. But Manu, I feel like we should just get stuck into this and dive into the chat with Toby about all things Bundesliga.
Sounds good.
And we are back this week with Tobias Kroeger, who joined us last week to discuss all things La Liga. We're a little closer to home this week, Toby, with the German Bundesliga market value update, which you obviously have a direct influence over, not just a kind of overseeing role. And there's been some huge changes at the very top. There's some, as always the case in German football, some very exciting young players that we want to get into, but we have to kind of touch on the kind of headline news, the top billing, which is the fact that there has been some changes among the kind of most valuable players in the world, most valuable players in the league, rather. Jamal Musiala has dropped slightly by 10 million euros, and Michael Olise has risen by 10 million euros and become the Bundesliga's most valuable player in the league. Do you want to just quickly run us through Olise's, the reason behind pushing up Olise's market value? Obviously, it's not cryptic, it's not a mystery why his market value has risen, but talk us through about, that almost that kind of changing of the guard, or that kind of change between the two best players in the league.
Yeah, so I have to be honest, we already saw it before in the last update in the winter, if we downgrade Musiala, but he wasn't fit. So we all seen the big injury he had from Donnarumma, which was not his fault. So that was just bad luck for him. But also before the injury, he wasn't on his best performances weeks or months ago. So we already had in mind, okay, maybe he's a bit too high, and it's not the most valuable player in the league. So then you already take a look on who could be potentially the most valuable player of the Bundesliga, and then you automatically look to Michael Olise, and you see his performances. You already said it. I think everybody sees that 19 goal contributions from 19 goal contributions since the last update, and now he will. I think in the crunch time of the Champions League, we will see if he really needs another step forward, but I think we can assume that he will be a part against Real Madrid and can make the difference. And yeah, from the whole package, he is the most valuable player in the Bundesliga and also one of the most valuable players in the world. Maybe a Ballon d'Or contender if everything goes right for him at Bayern and also with France at the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been nothing short of a revelation since joining Bayern, and very reminiscent almost of Arjen Robben in the way that he likes to cut inside on that left foot. And some of the goals he scored this season are outstanding. It's definitely worth looking up his goal compilation already at Bayern Munich because it's already got some incredible screamers. Manu, this offers up a kind of interesting contest or rivalry between these two players, Musiala and Olise, because as Toby says, Musiala's been out for much of the season through injury. He's been a little slow getting back up to match sharpness, which is understandable because he's had such a huge injury, but he is kind of more or less back now for Bayern. You would expect him to kind of play for the rest of the season. Then after that, we obviously have a World Cup where both Olise for France and Musiala for Germany will be going into that competition with every intention of winning it. So, these two players are kind of neck and neck right now, but that seems unlikely to change over the course of the next 5 or 6 months, depending on who wins what.
Yeah, I think, we all know the World Cup is the big one for market values. We can argue all day whether it should be, whether like a sample size like a World Cup should determine market values. I think we can all agree it shouldn't, but that's not how the market works. And so, yeah, of course, I think Jamal Musiala is a little bit at a crossroads. I think he's a phenomenal player. It's going to be an awkward rivalry, though, Stefan, considering that the two of them are really close friends. Michael Olise, Jamal Musiala, and Alphonso Davies can't be separated, right? So that's going to be an awkward rivalry between those two players. But yeah, I think Jamal has a really important 6 months coming up. His market value has dropped. The injury that he suffered at the Club World Cup was severe. I was at the tournament when it happened, and it is the sort of injury where you worry about the long-term implications, right? Because of the way he plays, the way he uses his feet. It was a very complicated break in his ankle and dislocated ankle as well. So for him, I think it's going to require time to come back to the level that we saw before the injury. And so, I think, the next 6 months are huge for him. And I think also that when I look at the market value evaluation, Tobias, what you guys did makes a ton of sense to me. Even though it as a big Musiala fan, I think he's one of the most fabulous players to watch in the game. It does hurt a little bit, but I totally understand it.
Yeah. Just briefly before we move on, Toby, this now moves Olise up into 6th place in the world's most valuable players, if I'm not mistaken, just below the likes of Vinicius Junior, Pedri, Kylian Mbappe, players we spoke about in the La Liga update last week. Yamal, of course, up to 200 million, who sits at 200 million, and Erling Haaland, who we spoke in episode 1 about in the Premier League market value update. From a Bundesliga point of view, not just specifically Olise, do you think a guy like Olise or potentially Musiala has to go out and prove himself in the Champions League by winning the Champions League and perhaps even doing something at the World Cup for someone like Olise to then make that next step up to be, he's obviously there or thereabouts, but, we're talking about a player who could potentially push up to 200 million euros at some point?
I think to push up to 200 million euros will be difficult in Germany in the Bundesliga. But in general, I think for Olise, it could be a next step for him to show his best performances also in the Champions League and when it comes to quarterfinals, semifinals, final, whatever. But I also think, it's also a little bit of bad luck that you play against Real Madrid in the quarterfinals, could also be a final. So I think these 2 games will be important also for his international reputation, I guess. So also on the big stage, the people from outside see his qualities also once more against a team like that. But for the player itself and his qualities itself, he doesn't need to prove anything, I guess. But for his reputation, it would be good when he brings some good performances against Real Madrid or even later in the tournament and in the World Cup, of course.
I'm glad you brought that up because 15 goals and 27 assists in 38 games is phenomenal, but his Champions League numbers are 3 goals and 6 assists in 9 games. And so I think that is maybe where there's room to grow.
Yeah, but it's also, I think it's also a thing that you can't or you shouldn't put everything just in numbers or compare everyone in numbers, because even Olise, I think also, like we said, or some people compare him to Robben, but when we compare him with Robben, we also have to think he's way more, or he's not that selfish like Robben was in his prime. So yeah, Olise has more assists. He's also like a playmaker from the right side, can also play everything in the offensive line. So I think he's more complete as a footballer, but Robben, with all his strengths and also with his mentality and everything like that, was a different beast, as we all know. But I don't think we should compare everyone just like in numbers. Like, we should see the player more.
Yeah. And of course, Arjen Robben has that Champions League trophy sitting in his cabinet in the Netherlands right now. So until Olise could do that with Bayern Munich, I think the comparisons aren't quite 100% just yet. Moving on, though, a player who probably would love to emulate Michael Olise at Bayern Munich, and that was, of course, Yan Diomande at RB Leipzig. Toby, he was undoubtedly one of the biggest winners from this market value update. He's one of the biggest winners from this season period. Before we started recording here, we're trying to quickly run the numbers. He's gained 30 million euros in market value in this market value update, which means for the season as a whole, his market value has gone up by 73.5 million euros. It's the largest market value upgrade of any player in the world this season. Top 5 leagues, top 15 leagues, top 4,000 leagues. No player has come close to him when it comes to the kind of incredible shock and surprise of this guy. And, you know, I'm sure everyone watching this knows who he is because he's been all over the news around the world. But do you want to just briefly explain to anyone who's been living in a cave for the last 8 months where Yan Diomande came from and why he's suddenly just ballooned in market value?
Yeah, I can remember when Diomande joined Leipzig for nearly 20 million in the summer. A lot of people were surprised because they didn't know him. And honestly, I already knew him just from Twitter scouting reports on X. So I knew where he or who he was, but I didn't expect him to be that good. And he's like a phenomenal player. He is has such a speed. I saw him in the stadium weeks ago, and I never saw a player with that acceleration on the first meters. It was like crazy. Then also the ball control he adds to that, and also the one-on-one qualities in dribbling. It's like the whole package for a winger, like the wingers we didn't see for a long time, as the game got more controlled in a tactical way. So, but he has a lot of abilities that everyone wants to see, and I also guess when he's playing a good World Cup, then the top clubs will fight for him, and then maybe we can also go right into the direction of 100 million. I could imagine that. I don't want to tease it, but I can imagine that we talk about numbers like 100 million euros in the summer. But he's just like the biggest talents in the offensive line.
I mean, obviously, RB Leipzig are no strangers to selling players for a huge amount of money. We did have an exclusive interview with Marcel Schaefer, who's the managing director of sport at RB Leipzig, and he told Transfermarkt that the club are obviously hoping to keep him for a long time. Manu, a joke that I think a long time for RB Leipzig is maybe 12 to 18 months, considering how quickly they flip players and move them on to the Premier League, etc. But before all that happens, we actually have to wind this all the way back and give you your dues here, Manu, because you actually sat down with Yan before, maybe not before Toby knew about him. It sounds like Toby was the first guy on Twitter to know who this guy was, but you sat down with Yan Diomande and spoke to him about, you know, his upbringing and his youth career, and you learned quite a lot about him. Was it last year you spoke to him?
I spoke to him just a few weeks after he signed for RB Leipzig, and was already part of the first team, which surprised me. I didn't think he would break into the first team so quickly. It's such a fascinating career because he obviously went to high school in the United States, right? Directly from the Ivory Coast, and trialed for a bunch of teams there, played for the DME Academy in the US in high school as well. And yeah, and then I went on trial with Charlotte FC in Colorado Rapids, and they all didn't think he was good enough. So, and then, of course, went back to Europe, to Spain, and the rest of his history. It's fascinating player. Really enjoyed speaking to him. The interview is still up on Transfermarkt. We actually updated it halfway through the year with some new information, right? Because it came to light what the asking price was, that there's no exit clause, which is something that RB Leipzig no longer want to do, period. They don't want to give players exit clauses anymore. I spoke to Marcel Schäfer a couple months ago about this, and he was really clear about wanting to keep the player as long as possible as well. And he emphasizes, I guess, that is in this interview that he did with our German colleagues. Yeah, but you know what? What I really thought was really interesting is just how clear-minded he was as a teenager who's just come to a new country. The fact that he established himself so quickly, the journey that he went through is very unorthodox, right? For a young player to develop this development path is not normal. And I don't know, watching him play live too, and how quickly he adapted from the second division in Spain to playing in one of the top 4 leagues is another remarkable feat. And like Toby said, I've been able to watch him a few times live in stadium. The skill sets are incredible on top of a fantastic personality. So yeah, I don't know, Toby, 100 million euros is, I think, is the asking price. And if he plays a good World Cup, a long time might be the summer.
Yeah, I think, or when I have to make a prediction, I think he will already join another team in the summer. But we will see.
Yeah.
It's just a prediction.
We're not reporting, we're guessing.
Yeah, and there certainly seems to be a growing list of clubs who have been linked with him since he joined RB Leipzig. Let's quickly move on to another player, Luka Vušković, who is another player who joined the Bundesliga this year on loan from Tottenham Hotspur. Really bizarre situation here for anyone who's maybe not been following along, because while Tottenham have been kind of tumbling down the Premier League table and specifically having a huge amount of trouble with both their central defenders, Toby, there's been this 19-year-old kid who's joined up at HSV to pick up some first-team experience in a top 5 league. And he's just kind of set about turning his market value from, I think it was 18 million euros at the start of the season, up to now 60 million euros after a 20 million euro upgrade in our latest market value update. And he's not quite the most viable player at Tottenham now. That still is Van de Ven, who is worth 5 million euros more than him. But what a bizarre situation to have for Tottenham fans and maybe watching this, where this kid on loan is just kind of going from strength to strength, and they must be kicking themselves at Tottenham, thinking we should have just held on to this guy for the new season, because he has been a revelation in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, Vušković is a phenomenal player. Like, he has such a dominance and like on the field. He doesn't care about his the strikers he plays against. It's like Girassi, he's just bullying him in the physical way, and he's a threat in the air. Like, he set a lot of records only this season for winning aerial duels, for example, and he plays with such a majority that it's really really good to see. And I think he's on the way to be like a perfect defender in the next years, and Tottenham could really need him. But we will see, as the biggest teams in the world are chasing him, according to rumors. And it could be a good case that he will never play for Spurs in the Premier League.
Yeah, that's the kind of fascinating thing about this, isn't it, Manu? I'm looking at his rumor page right now. You've got Borussia Dortmund, RB Leipzig, PSG, Barcelona, all clubs have been linked with them since the start of this year. I think some hopeful people have stuck in Haasveld or Hamburg, as they're known in English, hoping that they can maybe pull together a fundraiser to maybe sign him. I think that might be a bit optimistic. Bayern Munich as well, heavily linked with him. The Bundesliga has kind of been known for developing a lot of these kind of very, as we would say in England, a Rolls Royce of a defender, in the sense that very kind of smooth on the ball, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Josko Guardiola, Van de Ven, who obviously moved to Tottenham as well, among other players as well. Nico Schlotterbeck at Borussia Dortmund's one who's obviously getting a lot of attention right now. Obviously, Manu, not to kind of ask you to put words into your mouth for for Toby here, but it's not just the performances from Vušković which has pushed up his market value. It's also the fact that most of the biggest clubs around Europe have quickly taken notice of those performances.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also against the performance against Boom, right? He scores that goal against Bayern Munich. Absolute leader on the pitch. What impresses me the most about him is at 19 years old, he comes to Hamburg SV, a giant of German football, a fallen giant of German football, trying to reestablish themselves in the Bundesliga. There's been a few people who thought, okay, HSV are going to really have a really hard time staying in the league this year. He comes in, steadies the ship. He's a huge part of why HSV are going to stay in the Bundesliga. I'm going to make this prediction now. They're standing right in the middle of the table, way better than anyone anticipated. And it's the leadership that he brings as a 19-year-old, right? And just also not just on the field, which is tremendous, to step up in a game against Bayern Munich and get a huge point that no one expected, and contributing in that kind of fashion as he did is incredible. But also the stuff, like, Toby, you live in Hamburg, the stuff that he does in and around the club is, from a loanee, let alone a 19-year-old loanee, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. And it's actually, when you think about it, like Tottenham at the moment, they're fighting relegation from the Premier League. They're a club in disarray. He's pretty much what you need. When you really think about it, like, maybe the biggest mistake that Tottenham made this season was loaning out Luka Vušković, because not only would they need him on the field and off the field at the moment, but it actually probably is going to lead to them losing him completely, because there's a good chance he's not going back.
I guess so. But I also have to mention maybe a little bit of background on the situation why he's joined HSV of all clubs, because his brother played here and was banned for doping for 4 years, and then the club and all the people at HSV just stand behind his brother. And then Luka was always here in Hamburg and also supported his brother, and was also at the celebration for the promotion in Hamburg. And he said he wants to play with his brother, which will be difficult because he's banned until next season. But he also said that the decision was clear for him to play for HSV when he gets on loan, because of the way the supporters of HSV took care of his brother. So it was a personal thing that he wanted to play here. Otherwise, HSV wouldn't stand a chance on any other teams who would have taken him. So it was just a good coincidence that he can play here. But as Manu said, everyone loves him. And it's also crazy that you go to other stadiums here in Germany when HSV playing there, and everyone, also from the other fans, the experts, everyone says, "Oh, I'm excited to see Luka Vušković." And yeah, it's kind of bizarre to have a player like him at HSV, to be honest.
If only there was a billionaire owner that could buy him for you guys.
It's also bizarre to hear football fans be excited to see a defender, but yeah, such is the talent, and it'd be very, very interesting to see if he does indeed stay at Tottenham next season. If they can avoid relegation, and maybe they could rebuild that squad around him. If a certain maybe Christian Romero decides to move on to Spain, there's a prediction for you. But we also have to move on. Two more players we want to touch on, Toby, before we let you go. Both of them at Bayer Leverkusen. Both of them have had their market values increased to 40 million euros. Christian Kofani and Ibrahim Matza. I was fortunate enough to actually be at Leverkusen's game last week against Arsenal in the Champions League, and I can confidently say they were the only two Leverkusen players on the pitch who had pass marks, except for maybe the goalkeeper, who pulled off some great saves. And I was speaking to someone at Leverkusen after the game, and sure enough, they said themselves that despite all the money that Leverkusen have spent this season, despite the number of players that they've brought into the club, Matza and Kofani are the two ones that really stand out. And that has been reflected in this market value update, because, Matza's market value's got up by 15 million euros, Kofani's has gone up by 18 million euros, and they're both very, very exciting young players.
Yeah, I can totally agree. With Matza, everyone in Germany saw him at Hertha the year before in the second division, and you saw that is a really interesting player, playmaker, going for all the through balls. Yeah, the control he has on the ball is just exciting to see, because you see he goes into duels with 2 or 3 players in the center of the field, and he keeps calm, keeps creating. So maybe he's also one player when you see on his goals or assists, maybe he doesn't look like a 40 million player in midfield, but when you have the eye test and you see him, he's a great talent. And I'm already excited what's ahead of him, or we can see from him in the
Yeah.
future.
Toby, can I quickly jump in there? Because I had a thought which Zulic returned to me there. And this is going to sound very bizarre to anyone listening, but the 2 players he reminds me of, if I had to mesh them together, would be John McGinn and Mesut Ozil. And if you can imagine such an abomination as those 2 players. And the reason I say that is because, he's very, very technically gifted on the ball, but he's also thick. Like he's strong, he's muscular, he plays with his socks rolled down, and no shin pads or anything like that. He's happy to get into scraps, and reminds me of the way that John McGinn plays in the Premier League, but obviously has the technical ability of, maybe, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Mesut Ozil, but he reminds me of a young Mesut Ozil once upon a time.
Yeah, definitely. He's not shy to go in duels with other players, and he's not shy about tackles. So I think he has a good overall package. For me, it's sad that he decided to play for Algeria, not for Germany.
Yeah.
That would be a perfect player for us, maybe even because when he came out, he was like a special, or like a number 10, maybe second striker, and now he got back to the center of the field, more like a number 8. And yeah, he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to hide from Musiala or Wirtz, because he could play behind them, but that's history. It will never happen. So it's sad for me, I guess.
Yeah. And Manu, what about Kofani? He's another young player who's burst onto the scene, only 19 years old, but we sometimes see this with young strikers who come through, where they just kind of very suddenly take on the responsibility and the presence of much older players. And we saw that against both games against Arsenal, where he was going toe to toe and having very physical battles with both Saliba and Gabriel, who we at Transfermarkt obviously rank as 2 of the best central defenders in the world. And he looked very comfortable there, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm a big Kofani fan. There's a parallel there with a player we talked about earlier, right? Diomande, that he was also signed from La Liga 2, Albacete. Excuse my Spanish. Everyone was a Spanish speaker. But, just really good scouting to find a player like that where no one else was looking, right? And they looked at his physical attributes. They're excellent. I wrote the English version of the market value text. And Tobias, I like what you said. To paraphrase, it is not necessarily the goal scoring that stands out. It's the way he uses his body and his physicality to make room for others that makes him such an outstanding profile, and a player that is really rare to find. Like, coaches always say one thing: you can't teach size, and that's definitely something with him. And the raw attributes are so high, and the physicality is so high, and his understanding of seeing players around him is already at such a high level at 19. And with strikers, and we're seeing this more and more, they don't really hit their prime until their late 20s, right? And he's already doing a lot of these things at 19. So you potentially have a player here that can develop for another 6, 7, 8 years. And so, yeah, it's a frightening prospect because I think he has enormous ability.
Yeah, just kind of maybe finally before we wrap up, Toby, off the back of what Manu says there, he's almost kind of had to come into that Leverkusen team out of necessity because of injuries to Patrick Schick. Obviously, Leverkusen spent a lot of money on players, but many of them haven't really worked out. They've also had injuries with a number of players, but it's almost even more impressive for both Kofani and Matza, but maybe more so Kofani in this instance, that they've been playing in a team that hasn't been particularly consistent or maybe lived up to the hype of the money that was spent in the summer. But Kofani stepped up where it's needed to be and where it's been counted this season.
Yeah, I think it was also brave from Leverkusen to already plan with him as the number 2 striker behind Schick, because everyone knows Schick is a top striker, but he's always injured. I would say he has a lot of injury problems. So we all knew that Kofane needs to play some games because of these injuries, and he stepped in. And I would say, when you see that he played at the Emirates as the starting striker in a Champions League round of 16 against Arsenal, then you already see that he developed that fast, that the trust is very high in him. So, yeah, like Manu said, the ceiling could be high. Let's see what the future brings in that case. But I also see a very talented striker with all the physical aspects that will be very interesting on the transfer market also in the summer already.
Yeah, absolutely. Two players who will undoubtedly be filling the rumour mill on Transfermarkt frequently, I suspect. Well, that's kind of all the time we have. Toby, once again, thank you for joining us on the show. Your input is always appreciated, especially when you get to speak about your favourite players at Haasval in Vušković. But yeah, thank you so much, and we'll speak to you again soon.
And I'm now joined by Goncalo Tristao Santos, the area manager at Transfermarkt for Portugal. Gonzalo, how's it going?
Yeah, nice, and you?
Yeah, good. It's a busy time in Transfermarkt. As you know, we have so many market value updates. It feels like this time of the year, March, we just have one after the other. Almost through. I know it's a really busy time for you. I have my market value update in April, so I still have the work ahead of me. But you finished yours, the Liga Portugal update. We'll get into the details in a moment, but what was your first overall impression, and how do you feel having it finally done and dusted?
Okay, so I think that one of the most important things about this update is that a lot of the main players, a lot of the stars of the Portuguese league got downgraded, and this is not usual. We are not used to give so many downgrades to the main players in the same update. Sometimes it happens through the season, but in the same update. And we are also not talking about an update or the update that we do in the end of the season. Usually in this update, we don't do so many changes, but the truth is that we really had to do some downgrades to some of the players. And we are even talking about, for instance, the two players that were the two most valuable players of this league. We're talking about Samu, the striker, the Spanish striker from FC Porto, and also Morten Hjulmand, the captain, and a midfielder from Sporting. They were both downgraded in 5 million euros to 45 million euros. And I think these two are the best examples I could give about what I was saying about these downgrades to the Portuguese league stars.
It's really interesting. Like, I wrote the article for the English domains using your quotes, right? And so I got the insight like a week beforehand. And when I looked into our system and I saw it, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of red. Like the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players, all red. I don't think I see that very often. Before we get into a couple specific... before we get into a couple specific examples, is that something you had in your mind ahead of time when you guys were doing it, or is that just something that just developed naturally?
Yeah, it's just something that we were making and discussing the values, and it just happened. And then when we saw it, we are also very, very surprised. And the thing is that it's not the Portuguese teams are not doing well this season. We have, for instance, FC Porto, who had an almost perfect first half of the Portuguese league, only lost 2 points. We have also FC Porto and Braga in the quarterfinals of Europa League, and obviously Sporting as well in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So in general, the Portuguese teams are doing well, and even the squads of Benfica and Sporting, the overall market value of the squad, it increased. But the truth is that the main players, the stars that I already talked about, well, they just went downgraded for different reasons. For instance, Samu was not having the same performances he had in the last season, and also he got a very serious injury now, so he will miss the World Cup, he will miss the rest of the season, of course, and so we decided to downgrade to decrease his value. And about Hjulmand, I think that the main reason is that although he's still one of the most important players in the team, and we just saw that against Bodo Glimt for the Champions League and that epic comeback that Sporting achieved. He was, at least for me, I watched the game. I was at the stadium actually, and he was one of the best players in that match. But the truth is that overall, his performances are not the same, are not at the same level as the last 2 seasons, and so he also will he will be 27 later this year. So we decided that he was not justifying a 50 million market value. So we took this decision, and he has now 45 million euros market value.
Do you sense with Hjulmand, he's such an interesting case because he's a defensive midfielder. This is a position that's really important in the game, right? Clubs are looking for defensive midfielders. They want these players. Do you sense that, especially with playing for Denmark, do you sense that this upcoming transfer window is almost like a career-defining transfer window for him? Because there's always been rumors around him, right? I mean, last summer, this winter, and I know doing these market values, we sometimes they get pushed up because of the anticipation of a big transfer, and then when that doesn't materialize, we're like, okay, well, maybe the market isn't as strong. And do you sense really that the time for him has now come, where we're saying, well, if this transfer doesn't come next summer, this could be just one of the many downgrades down the road?
Yeah, and I can't predict the future, but I really think this is Hjulmand's last season at Sporting. I think that that will happen. The same that happened to Gyökeres last season. So there are some informations in the Portuguese media saying that there is this deal between Sporting and Hjulmand to, of course, if a club offers this value that Sporting wants, so there is this deal between the two parts. So that transfer became a done deal this summer, and I really think it's going to happen because Hjulmand is such a great player, and I think some of the top European clubs must have some interest in him. And if a good offer arrives at Alvalade, I think that Sporting will sell him, and I think it's time for him to go. I'm not saying that Sporting or the Portuguese league doesn't want him. Of course, we want him here because he's a fantastic player. But I really think he needs to step up and go to another league for the sake of his career. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting case. You already mentioned Samu as well. Had prospects of playing with Spain at the World Cups, big tournaments. I made this point a few times already on the show. I always think it's really funny that we ourselves always say, like, really the World Cup shouldn't be bringing up a market value of a player because it's such a short sample size. But unfortunately, that's not how clubs see it, right? it's the
Have
year
a lot of
2020.
examples of players that were brought for very high values because of their performance on the World Cup. Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive because it's such a short sample size. For some of these players, it's 3 or 4 games, and then all of a sudden their market value goes up.
Such an important competition, it really affects the market value of the players. Yes.
So I guess now with Samu not going, what do you anticipate is going to happen here? You know, his market value dropped by 5 million euros. He's injured now. What are the next steps going to be? Are Porto going to hang on and see how it goes next year, and then maybe see if there's a market?
Yeah, of course. I don't think he's going to leave the club this summer because of the injury. I think he's going to be out for some months now, so it's not going to be the perfect timing for a sale. I think he's going to stay at Portugal. And I mean, Samu is so young. He's only 21 years old, although we already saw him scoring goals at Spain. Now he's his second season in Portugal, but he's only 21 years old actually, so he has a lot of potential, and I think he has the qualities to get a good evaluation again in the future. But we never know that sometimes these players that have these difficult injuries, they don't come back the same. But I mean, I think Samu is so young that I think he has the energy and the capacities to full recover and to get back to the pitch scoring goals and maybe have a 15 million or even higher million euros evaluation in the future. We never know. As you can see, or as you have been seeing the last years, the strikers from the big three Portuguese clubs always good evaluations, and they are sold for big fees to important clubs, and I think that eventually will also happen with Samu.
It's not all bad news though for the big clubs on talented players in Portugal. One name that really stood out to me is Oscar Pituchevski. He joined Porto in January, right, from Jagiellonia.
So like 2 months ago.
Yeah, 2 months ago, and outstanding. His market value goes up by 8 million, from 12 million to 20 million euros.
Exactly.
3 goals and 2 assists at 8 Liga Portugal matches. Sounds like a really, really great talent that Porto have found there. And they're so good at this, aren't they? They're so good at finding these young guys and developing them. And then obviously Pituchevski, I see his release clause is 60 million euros. Considering the fact that they just signed him for 8 million euros, he already seems like a really good prospect for them.
Yeah, and the thing is that he's only 17, so when he celebrates his 18th anniversary, I think that FC Porto is going to offer him a new and bigger contract, probably with a bigger release clause. But yeah, as you said, Pituchevski, he scored 3 goals in the league only since January, and he scored those 3 goals in the last 3 match days of the Portuguese league. So he's really, really playing very, very, very well. The thing is that when he arrives, I think that most of us here in Portugal thought that he would probably had to go to the B team, to the second team to have minutes. But I don't know, some injuries, some other players that play there in the wings not performing their best. All of that just created the chance to Pituchevski become a regular starter, and he's taking the opportunity fantastically. He's playing well, he's scoring goals, giving assists, and for me, he's the biggest surprise of the second half of the Portuguese league so far. He's playing very, very well, and the fact that he's already a starter, it's surprising me, but he's deserving it because of his performance. Yeah, great player, has a lot of potential. He's not even 18 years old, as I said. I think he will celebrate his 18th anniversary in May. So
May 20th.
Yeah, so yeah, very young player and already leaving a mark in a season that may be really, really important to Porto, because they haven't won the league in some years now, 4 years, I think, and they have this fantastic opportunity to win the league again this season. They are ahead, so and he's being a very important part of it in the second half of the season. So I think this increase in market value is really, really deserved.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic talent. You can find his market value, valuation, everything else that Goncalo talked about on all of our English domains, and of course on your great homepage too if you're joining us from Portugal. The texts are all out, so go check that out. Goncalo, it's a real pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, the pleasure was mine. Thank you for the invitation.
So we are now joined by our German Transfermarkt colleague, Marius Soyke, who is the podcast host of the Serie A podcast, Serie A More, and all-round Italian football expert at Transfermarkt. Marius, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you doing?
Thank you for the invite. I just finished my early shift for the editorial team, and this is like the perfect end to a workday now.
I'll take that. Is it an extension of the workday, or is this when you just officially fun you get to do after the show or after your shift?
Yeah, it's a bit of an extension.
Yeah, I thought so. Well, we appreciate it nonetheless. Try not to keep you too long, but I'm going to jump straight into the biggest talking points from this market value update. The Serie A market update came out on Tuesday, so it's the day before this podcast was released. And to no great surprise, some of the headline figures were Inter Milan, who I think most people would consider the biggest or the best team in Italian football right now. And Marius, I want to start with Alessandro Bastoni. He dropped his market value from 80 million euros to 70 million euros. This is quite significant because he was, before this market value update, the joint most viable central defender in the world. He now drops down to, I think, fifth. For anyone who hasn't been watching Italian football this season and thinks, oh, I thought Bastoni was, this really exciting up-and-coming defender, could you offer some sort of explanation as to why we've dropped his market value this season?
I think he still is one of the most exciting defenders. He has got like the full package. He's really good at, obviously, at defending. He's fast. He's good on the ball. He has excellent passing abilities. When he since Inzaghi was Inter coach, he has a lot of runs to the front to help out with the midfielders and strikers, and is really like vital to the whole Inter strategy. Excellent left foot, but I don't know. It's more like he's not having a bad season by all means. It's just that somehow it feels a bit like with the second Champions League final lost last season with the 5-0 to PSG. That this cycle for Inter it's not over, but it's a bit on the decline, if you know what I mean. And he's still not old. He's 26, I think. So not old at all. But he should be like the boss of the defense. And but they feel a bit more vulnerable this season under the new coach Christian Kivu than they were with Inzaghi, and he hasn't been able to stop this from happening. And he's somehow, as all the other guys in the team, or most of the other guys on the team, he's not really at his very, very best at the moment. I mean, and the getting beaten 2 times by Bodo Glimt and not having like a real chance. They had a lot of goal scoring opportunities, but it was totally deserved for Bodo Glimt to beat them even at San Siro. And there's at some point you have to take this into account.
Do you think he's maybe at a stage in his career where, because in the market value update, Yatin Dietel, our area manager for Italy, references that there's now younger players coming through. There's Jan Bissek, the German international, young defenders coming through who are pushing for those positions themselves. And as you said, Inter are in the middle of this rebuild, but they have this player who was there from the previous project. Do you think he maybe has to step up a level, or perhaps even move clubs to something new to kind of almost like start a new chapter in his career in order to avoid what has seemingly been something of a malaise at Inter this season?
I think that that decision will have to be made probably not this summer. They can finish the season like on a good point. They have the Scudetto like in their own hands, 6 points in front of Milan, and I think his contract's running until 2028. So I don't think they will have like the financial problems, and they need to sell him this summer. But maybe when the contract next year is running out, 12 months in the future, then maybe it's time for him to make that decision. Either be the Inter captain, maybe for the next 5 years, or just when you're 27 or 28, just make that one final step, go to the Premier League. Yeah, and of course there will be, when it is possible to sign him, I guess there will be a lot of interest.
Yeah, for sure. one positive from the market value update for Inter Milan fans was, of course, Pio Esposito, the young central forward. His market value has risen. He's something of a revelation in Serie A this season, Marius, as far as I can tell. He spent last season on loan in Serie A B, where he scored lots of goals. He's now made the step up to the first team. And as a result, his market value has really skyrocketed this season.
Yeah, this is something that rarely happens with top teams in Serie A. We've seen it in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe with Kenan Yildiz, and when Bastoni broke out with Inter, that like young players from the youth squads getting into the starting 11 of the top teams like really fast. But with Esposito, it was the case when he was at Spezia that you already saw he has it all, you know, like he's a striker they can rely on for the future project, definitely. And they would make a mistake if there were, of course, discussions in the rumor mill. Are they going to loan him out again, like to a smaller Serie A club maybe? And I think they did very well to not do this. And of course, his development showcases this. He's now at 45 million. I don't think there is another Italian player in his range of age who's near that evaluation. And he really didn't have any problems getting into the team, getting like to internalize the strategy. And now he's even, he's like on the verge of kicking Marcus Thuram out of the team, because he hasn't scored in a while, and Esposito gets his chances, and he shows that he can step up.
Yeah, Esposito was a great player. Marius, I was going to ask you about Christian Pulisic at AC Milan. You know, his market value drops. It's something, he's not the only superstar coming out of CONCACAF ahead of the World Cup to drop in market value. We did the same with Alphonso Davies last week, right, in the Bundesliga. But it really seems like that with Pulisic, when he first joined Milan, he really reestablished himself. The goal scoring, the production in general was up significantly. His market value started skyrocketing again, but he really seems to have not only hit a plateau, but really struggled with injuries. And I kind of feel like the downgrade once again is very consequential.
Yeah, I kind of really felt bad about it, because when we raised his market value to the 60 million, he's gone down 10 to 50 now. I think it was in October, and it was at a moment when like everything he did resulted in goals. Like he had a lot of assists, a lot of own goals by his own, and he was just the best attacking player in Serie A at that moment. And then in November he got injured, and he kind of never got back to his form. Like and it's his home World Cup in summer, and we like had this hope that he would take the good form he had at the start of the season, bring back Milan to Champions League, which he will probably do. But it's not because he is so decisive for them anymore. He hasn't scored in 2026 at all. He provided one assist last weekend when they beat Torino, but I think it was his only goal contribution this year. And there were patches where he came from the bench a lot, had to share space with Nkunku and Rafael Leao, who are also injury-prone players and kind of similar players, not like this typical number 9 figures, but he like I said, he never really got back to that form he had at the beginning of the season. And so it also kind of feels like when he would have had the season where he scores 20 goals and then goes to the World Cup, maybe a Premier League club will come back to him, like Chelsea did a couple of years ago. but with a couple of months like this, it feels not so likely anymore.
The injuries are just always a concern with him. He just can't stay fit, right?
Exactly.
That's what hurt him at Chelsea as well. I think the consistency of just being able to hammer out a full season and just being healthy is what really dinged him throughout his career. It's not all bad news still for the US men's national team. Weston McKennie, he's such an interesting figure. His market value goes from 22 million to 30 million euros. It's a significant increase. And especially for a player who we thought would be gone very soon. He's now renewed his contract at Juventus, right? After a stint in which he was also sent out on loan to Leeds, we thought like his Juve career would be certainly over a few times now. But yeah, he has really re-established himself at Juve, and it's a really good story, I think.
Yeah, totally. There were a couple of times when I thought, okay, now next summer they will sell him because they're in constant need of getting millions because of settlement agreements with UEFA and mismanagement in the past. And there was this feeling that you can sell him for 20 million and get someone who's like a clear starter for your team as a replacement. But he fought back. He didn't get sold. And now he's more important than ever. He it's so funny because he like Yatin said in the market value update, he played at on nearly every position at Juve. Only central back and goalkeeper is missing. Like he was a false 9, he was a wing back, and or he was a 6. Now he's like an attacking 10, something maybe like Jude Bellingham played in his first season for Real Madrid, and it's really spectacular. Not as far as Juventus games are spectacular, that somehow the opponent's defenders seem to like miss him on the pitch, and then he runs into the box and he gets the ball and he scores. And I think he's at 8 goals now. I don't know if he's ever managed to be so productive in one season. And with Luciano Spalletti's appointment as coach, he really made this last step in his own evolution, like to manifest himself like in this position, and not be someone you can throw around in the team. Like when you have someone else missing, then you can play McKennie on that position. Now he's really important in this specific role.
Yeah, very interesting stuff happening at Juventus. But before we let you go, Marius, I have to ask about Como. They are the club that everyone's interested in Serie A. They had a lot of good news in this market value update. Their market value, the squad market value increased by 39 million euros. According to my math, that means their squad has increased by 107 million euros this season, more than any Serie A club. 4 of the top 20 biggest winners in the update were Como players. For anyone who hasn't had a chance to watch Como and maybe takes from time to time a look at the Serie A league table and is surprised to see them sitting 4th and potentially playing in the Champions League next season, who are the players for football fans to keep an eye on and get excited about in this team?
Like the one obvious choice is, of course, Nico Paz, who didn't get an update this season because he was at kind of a low point in the season for the last couple of weeks, but he got a lot of upgrades in the past and over the last couple of months, but he will probably be rejoining Real Madrid in summer. But they have a lot of like really exciting talent. The whole squad is not like on Monaco or Stuttgart or whatever level young. But like the starting players, apart from 1 or 2 defenders, are all between, I think, 19 and 24, and they really have like this big scouting division. They rely a lot on data-driven scouting, and they got all these top level experts like from the Netherlands and Belgium and stuff the other clubs did for a while now, but in Italy sometimes it always runs a little bit slower, like the innovations coming in, and they did that. It always helps when you have like an unlimited amount of money at your disposal. They have these investors from Indonesia, tobacco moguls, very rich people. It will be interesting to see how UEFA handles this case, because they didn't sell anyone over the last couple of years and always just got players in. So we have to see if they can spend a lot of millions from the Champions League in the summer. But they, unless they don't have to provide like transfer income for UEFA, they won't need to sell anyone because they have the money. They all have long contracts, and they got this project going. I think even Cesc Fabregas, he will be very ambitious to coach when there's an opening, but when he can play with Como in Champions League, maybe they can persuade him to stay for another 1 or 2 years. And now I didn't even talk about the players. One who's got a big upgrade is Anastasios Douvikas, is a 26-year-old centre forward from Greece. He went up from 10 million to 18 million. They even bought him for a fee higher than his market value last year. But we were kind of we wanted to wait a bit, because in the beginning he wasn't like consistently playing in the starting 11, but now he's I think he's the second best goal scorer in Serie A right now. They won 5 games in a row, and he also started scoring against top clubs, against Roma, for example, who they will have to beat in the table to get to the Champions League, which they are doing at the moment. And yeah, he's got a big upgrade. Like I said, from 10 to 18 million. Another one is Adrian Lado, who I didn't even see him play yet. He came in the winter from Sweden, from his home country, and he was just 1 million, cost 10 million, and we raised him to that number because it feels like when Como is spending this money on a player who's 18, they really know what they're doing. As you can like look at the players they signed in the past, like Diao or Jesus Rodriguez. He has to be a big talent to make them spend this kind of money. And there's more, like Jacobo Ramon update from 18 to 25 million. They bought him from the second team of Real Madrid, and now he's one of the most promising defenders in Serie A. I think maybe after the World Cup he will play a role for the Spanish national team too. I don't know how this what it is with the other defenders in Spain right now, but I think they have to nominate him. And really for me the most interesting case right now is Martin Baturina. He's a Croatian attacking midfielder, and he's maybe the most or one of the most lethal players in Serie A at the moment. He came in summer from his home country, and they spent big on him, and he took his time to adapt, and they gave him the time. I think other clubs would have maybe gone for a sale in winter because he didn't deliver for 6 months, but now he's there and he's scoring 5 goals in the last 8 matches, I think. And he's really there now. He's still young, 23, and he went up to 24 million from 18. Yeah, it's like the perfect example of what they are doing on the transfer market and how they turn those players into like really, really vital players for their system, and those players are bringing them definitely to the European Cup, maybe to Champions League.
It's really interesting. Como is such a fascinating case, right? On player development and came out of nowhere. So I don't know if I can add anything, Stefan. Can you? This was very thorough.
I was going to say, yeah, extremely thorough, Marius, on Inter, on AC Milan, on Juventus, and then on Como. And we'll definitely have to get you back on the show next time. Not just for the next Italian market value update, which of course people can go read and extensively and go see the full breakdown in the league on Transfermarkt. But next time we are discussing Italian teams or Italian players in general. So big thank you for coming on the show this week. And like we said at the top, if you guys want to listen to more of Marius's takes on Italian football, you can listen to the Serie A More podcast, which he hosts every week. And yeah, Marius, thank you so much.
It's in German, of course, but yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun. I hope I could help, and see you next time.
Well, you could link it up with your Duolingo, maybe, if you don't speak German, and a good little lesson. But yeah, thank you so much, Marius, and we'll speak to you soon.